Morning everyone. I hope you can hear Adam and I here at Transafe WA. It is 10 a.m, so we'll just give everyone a minute or so to join us, and we'll get started with our mini forum this morning. Good morning everyone. Pleased that you can join us on this Monday morning in Perth, Western Australia. Thanks to those who are not necessarily in our state who have joined us for this mini forum today. I hope everyone can hear me okay. That's great. Thanks, Greg. I can see your thumbs up. That's helpful. So for those that are not familiar with Transafe WA, we are a non-profit road transport industry safety initiative. We've been operating in Western Australia since 2013, and our main focus is on running events for the industry and projects based around safe heavy vehicle operations and interactions. So since 2013, Transafe WA has delivered 23 road transport industry safety forums to thousands of industry participants throughout Western Australia. We've provided a forum during that time for the discussion of industry's needs and risks, and at the same time provided a conduit for industry participants to its regulators and key decision makers. We've also developed and run campaigns to educate the general public, to share the road safely with heavy vehicles. Today's presentation is kind of born out of the COVID-19 pandemic and the fact that for the last 6 months or so, we haven't been able to run our forums in the traditional way. And so we thought it was a good opportunity to start to bring some skill sets in a short webinar forum to those that are connected with Transafe WA, and Adam happily has joined us to be the first one of those presenters. So Adam is a director of Tyre Australia and has been a member of Transafe WA since its inception. Adam is known to many of you, I believe. He's been involved with the tyre industry for decades, providing management and guidance to companies in Australia, Southeast Asia, South America and Western Africa. With experience in tyre manufacturing and an extensive skill set learned from time on the ground, Adam found the progression towards industry training and advocacy was natural and a payback for all the inputs over the years. He's produced training manuals, tyre policy and management plans, and Adam's writing now extends to international trade journals. Transafe WA was a perfect fit when Chairman Steve Post outlined his vision for our association. Adam puts tyres at the foundation of the modern motor vehicle and says all vehicle systems rely upon the tyres to perform, and yet he says too many people ignore their tyres. As a director of Tyre Australia, Adam works towards illuminating industry and the general public to the crucial role that tyres play in our societies. So I'm about to hand over to Adam to begin his presentation. Everyone is currently muted, but at the end of the conversation, there'll be an opportunity for questions and answers. So at that point, you can unmute your audio and pose a question to Adam. You can also type a question via the chat function if you would like me to read that out at the end of the presentation. So I'm going to now share Adam's presentation and we'll get underway. Sorry for a sec, I'll just find that one.
Good morning, everybody. Those that you'll understand my writing of assume. Way too many people think that their tyres are okay, but really don't have any idea. The graphic that you see on the screen is symptomatic of my feeling towards a lot of people, not only in the general public, but certainly in industry as well. There was a question in there, something that a lot of people don't actually understand about tyres, and that's the primary function of a tyre. It's not to grip the road, it's not to support the load, it's actually to hold the air inside the tyre. The air is the part of the tyre that actually does the work. So hopefully today we'll get some takeaways for you to understand how you can improve the economic outcomes, but most importantly, improve the safety outcomes for your fleets. So when we look at tyres, a small event can have a very catastrophic outcome. And yes, it can happen, and then it keeps on happening. And when you think it's over, it continues. Then the ramifications keep on coming and coming. And when you think it's stopped, it may not have. So just that one little nudge from the forklift there is akin to, say, a steer tyre failure. Steer tyre failing on a semi-trailer or a road train can have catastrophic effects. So how do you minimise the consequences of such an event, and most importantly, mitigate the risks? So with modern day electronics, we can actually understand what tyres are doing. You know, the driver sitting in the cab of this road train has got no idea of what the tyres on the second, third, fourth, fifth trailer are doing. Absolutely no idea whatsoever. With modern electronics, we've now got the tools where we can understand exactly what the tyres are doing. This image is from an infrared camera that shows hotspots. The blue is the cold, the red is the hot. So we can start to understand exactly what the machines are doing and how they're doing it, what they're experiencing. A lot of people don't consider that tyres operate differently. They're all the same. Well, hopefully by the end of the presentation, you will have a better understanding. This is not just Adam banging on about tyres because he's a tyre man. NTI presented their 2020 report, which outlined their research into the events that they've had claims upon and looked at major claims. So this is claims in excess of $50,000. So what they found from the previous period was that non-impact fires had increased, and that increase was predominantly as a result of wheel end fires. Now, tyres are on the end of the wheel end, so if there's a problem with the wheel end, the tyres are going to reflect that. When we look at the chart down on the bottom right there, mechanical failure, we can see that tyres represent nearly 60% of the mechanical failure reasons. 60%. So surely we can control that. We can reduce, we can mitigate that risk. It's interesting that tyres traditionally have been on the bottom of the pile when in fact they're one of the most critical points of vehicle systems. I was having discussions with NHVR some time ago about the braking standards, and the connection between the braking mechanism and the pavement wasn't recognised until I pointed out that it's the wheel and tyre that actually transfers the braking forces. The brake can be 100% perfect, but the truck may not stop within the required distance because the tyres aren't right. So tyres are an integral and crucial part of safety systems and truck operating systems. Where are we? I can tell when my tyres are under pressure. Well, each one of these frames represents a 10 psi reduction in pressure on a steer tyre. When I show this to drivers and ask them, tell me when the tyre's underinflated, generally it's the third frame that they go now. And well, that now is 20% underinflated. you can't really see looking at it as individual, but when we sequence them all together, you can see how that tyre is actually dropping inch and a half in height. So it's affecting steering. It's also affecting the performance of the tyre. So that's going from fully inflated at 120 PSI to 60 PSI. The pre-start inspections, visual, check the tyres. Well, yes, the vehicle's got tyres on. I can't tell the difference between a tyre that's appropriately inflated and one that's 20% underinflated. How do you expect a driver to tell that when he does his tick and flick on pre-start? So, the consequences. This is a steer tyre from a Kenworth operating in the northwest of Western Australia. The drivers had just done a swap. The second driver was getting back up to speed. He said about 80 kilometres an hour, it started to vibrate. So threw out the picks, pulled it up, but by that time the tyre had catastrophically failed, as you see. To give you an idea of the costs involved, just from a mechanical viewpoint, a bonnet for a long-nosed Kenworth is close on $12,000 unpainted, just the bonnet. So when a tyre destroys itself and takes the fiberglass out, there's an immediate $12,000 cost. Well, by the time this truck was towed back to Perth from 1,800 kilometres north, and the costs mount up. Thankfully, there were no other vehicles involved, but consider a road train crossing to the wrong side of the road when a steer tyre's failed. What sort of consequences could there be? Yes. Says a lot for the safety barriers in the middle of the road, but if you look now, you'll see a poof of dust, and that's the tyre gone, and the truck actually stops faster than it could if it was under brakes. Now, if the safety barrier wasn't there, what do you think would have happened? It would have cleaned up at least 2 vehicles there, if not more. The consequences? Very extreme. Potential is there. It can and does happen. Already this year, I've been involved with 5 steer tyre failures. It does happen. It's not just steer tyres. This was recorded in outback Queensland, where a drive tyre went up in smoke on a fuel tanker. Why? More than likely, the tyre was running underinflated. It could have been a wheel end, who knows? But the driver had no idea until the flames started to appear early morning. So the whole rig was a total loss. The road was closed. I dare say they had to repair that section of road. At what cost? So the consequences can be quite horrific. Now, it's not just the safety. When we look at economics, running tyres properly inflated, appropriately inflated, provides yields in decreased fuel burn. Depending on how well the truck is run, it could be up to 5%. We also get an increase in wheel end life. BPW, the German axle manufacturer, has done a report where they said a 5 PSI difference in joules is worth 10% reduction in bearing life. 10 PSI difference is worth 20% reduction in bearing life. So there's a whole lot of ramifications as a result of the tyres. How many of you followed a road train down the highway and seen the trailers wiggling, waggling everywhere? So the driver's working hard to keep everything under control. So tyres actually influence fatigue. If a driver's chasing tyres down the road because the trailers are waggling, then he's constantly making all of these minute, subtle adjustments to the steering to keep the thing in line. Of course, he's going to be tired earlier than it would be if the trailers were just all running properly behind him. And again, this source is Yokohama tyres. It's not just Adam. The results, I'm sure that we've all seen the road gators on the side of the road, and no, they're not retreads. 60% of the road gators on roadside verges are actually deemed to be from virgin tyres, that is unretreaded tyres. And before people run away and go up the retreads, next time you're on a commercial jet aircraft, figure that you're probably landing on retreaded tyres. aircraft tyres are retreaded 4 times before the airlines actually pay the tyre manufacturer totally. Now, the very worst thing you can do with an underinflated tyre is simply inflate it. Last year on the Brisbane waterfront, there was a fatality when a driver did exactly that. It's a thing called a zipper failure, and the photo that you're looking at now is the zipper failure, where the tyre has failed catastrophically. Externally, you just cannot see it. I can't see it. I can look at the inside, at the liner of the tyre, and I can see the damage there that is probably going to indicate that there is potential for a zipper failure. This next video shows you exactly a zipper failure in function. I'm hoping the sound is all okay.
When individual flights have been flexed beyond their limit, they break. This is audible when inflating as a popping sound. This flight failure causes more force to be withheld by each of the remaining flies. In turn, these flies break, perpetuating and accelerating the problem like a zip-line does. Finally, there aren't enough flies left to hold the compressed air inside, leading to a rapid readjustment of pressure. When this happens, the compressed air surges from the tyre into the surrounding area with great speed and tremendous force. The compressed air inside a 295 ATR 22.5 has a force equivalent to 12 tons. If the tyre explodes, that force escapes rapidly. If you're in the way, it's like being hit by a truck.
So on your way home tonight in the traffic, when you pull up at a set of lights and you stop beside a truck or a bus, think about what you're sitting beside. I generally move away from the tyres. This is a hazard recognition where we provide inflation tooling to customers, and they've all got 3 to 5 metre tails between the gauge, the trigger, and the actual spud that goes onto the tyre to inflate it, so that you can move into the safety zone. I absolutely shudder when I see these 4-wheel drive people kneeling down beside a tyre, inflating it after they've run down the beach. They've got no idea about the explosive force of a tyre. You've just seen it. So in all of your tyre inflation procedures, move away from this danger zone at the sidewall. The other issue that we see with transport is wheel offs. Now, this image is showing a pair of jewels with the brake drum in place. So my analysis of this is it's been a bearing failure and the whole hub has parted company from the truck. The other instance that you can get is the failure of the wheel studs, the fasteners. People use inch drive rattle guns to tighten up wheel nuts, and it stretches the studs, stretches the wheel nuts to the point where they become plastic. So no matter how much they tighten them up, the wheel stud is not going to retain the wheel or the wheels onto the hub. It is imperative that a torque wrench is used to tighten the wheel nuts to the manufacturer's specific torque. If the manufacturer calls for a light oil to be used on the wheel studs, use the light oil. Don't use a moly lube. Moly lube will reduce by a factor of 4 the amount of torque required to achieve the clamping force to hold the wheels on. I looked after a fleet in Indonesia, in outback Indonesia, and my greatest fear driving down a haul road every day was to be meeting a pair of dual tyres coming at me. It happened regularly. Thankfully, I was never in firing line. When we look at the subsequent events after a tyre event, there's going to be questions asked. If there's an injury or fatality, quite definitely there are going to be questions asked. And that surrounds around how you planned for tyre maintenance, tyre management. What policies did you have in place? The bottom paragraph there, where in the event of a fatality, you could be standing up in front of the court saying, well, we didn't have anything in place, or I don't know, or the tyre service does it, or here's the evidence, here's our policies, here's our tyre management, here's our tyre pressure data. We've taken every step as reasonably practical to mitigate the risk. So these days, it's about mitigating risk, improving safety, and with tyres being a low-hanging fruit, there's positive economic outcomes as well. Now, when we look at tyres, we don't consider them as a team, but here we can see a tyre scrapyard where there are quite a number of tyres that are brand new. There are quite a number of tyres that are worn in a regular fashion. They haven't been operating as a team. They've been operating as a series of individuals. So when we consider a football team or a sports team, if we've got 15 guys on the field and they're all running in 15 different directions, are we actually going to be able to achieve what the object of the game is, and that's to get towards the goal? When we look at the axles on heavy transport in Australia, dual tyre axles outnumber single tyre axles by magnitudes. Consider a rigid truck. There's 2 dual tyre axles, one single. On a road train, there can be 12, there can be 24, there can be multiples. So dual tyre axles outnumber single tyre axles by magnitude. You've got 4 tyres bolted to one axle. Are they operating as 4 individuals, or are they operating as a team? You've got a tugger rope wall. There's four men on either side. If they're operating as 4 individuals, as opposed to the other side that's operating as a team, who do you think's going to win? I know straight up. So why are tyres considered so differently? There are 4 tyres on a dual tyre axle. You get them all working at the same rate. This is from data that we've pulled from trucks, and the red and the gold trace on the left-hand side are from the right-hand side of the truck. The grey and the green is from the left-hand side of the truck. So on the right-hand side of the truck, we've got one tyre, the gold tyre, is working its butt off. The red tyre is along for the ride. When we look at the drive, we can see the blue trace out on the right is a tyre that's working very hard. The dark blue and the grey, those tyres are just not working. So here we've got 2 tyres that are just not working. We've got 3, 4 tyres that are doing, we've got 1 tyre that's working seriously hard. So how do we get them all to work as a team? And again, you'll hear me talk about the 6M rule. If we can't measure, we can't manage. Very old basic engineering principle. Well, we take it a little bit further. We measure, then we can monitor. We can find out what they're doing. We can maintain them appropriately. We can manage them. And if we do all of these things well, then we can make money out of them. And that's the object of transport, to get the freight from point A to point B at the best competitive price point. So when we consider all of the modern electronic aids that we've got, GPS tracking, even down to devices that determine that the driver's eyelids have been closing more often than they should be, what do we do for the foundation of the vehicle? The tyre, the thing that the steering, the braking, the driver, everything relies upon the tyre to perform. What do we actually do for the tyre? Oh, every 5 hours we get out and we slap it with a lump of pipe and we go, yeah, that's okay. No, that might have been okay for years ago. These days, no, we can do a lot better. This is a data trace from a cross-country Kenworth. On the left, leaving Perth, in the middle, arriving in Melbourne, then departing Melbourne and arriving back in Perth. The blue and the red trace in the upper are the steer tyres. The other 8 traces underneath are the drive tyres. Now, what interested me a lot with this, and hopefully you can see the mouse moving. There was one tyre that was actually overheating. Now, when you look at the difference between the pressure there and the pressure down here, we've got 15 psi difference. 15 psi is a lot. That equates to 25 mil difference in rolling circumference. There are a lot of reasons behind this, but working with this operator, we were actually able to get the tyres set so that they would all perform in the same manner. They'd work as a team, not as 8 individuals. This is a movie from Bridgestone.
Mismatched tread depths or mismatched inflation pressures. If one tire is smaller than the other, it cannot cover the same distance in a single revolution as the bigger tire. But because the tires are bolted together, it has to cover the same distance. What happens is that the bigger tire scuffs the smaller tire over that extra distance every time it goes around. The smaller tire can run hotter and wear faster. It may even act as a brake, holding the vehicle better, wasting fuel. In this example, we measured this tire circumference by rolling it across the shop floor. Then we dropped inflation pressure 5 psi and measured the circumference again. With just 5 psi difference, we found a circumference difference of 5/16 of an inch. That doesn't sound like much until you figure out how much that is over a year's usage. This mismatch could result in driving the smaller tire over 13 feet every mile. In 100,000 miles, this works out to more than 246 extra miles of pure scuffing wear on the smaller tire, like spinning the tire on the pavement for the equivalent of 246 miles. And that's with the difference of just 5 psi.
How many of your tyres are just 5 psi difference? It's getting pretty close. It can be done. Yes, it is possible. The electronic systems tyre pressure monitoring we're becoming more familiar with. It's been mandated in the US since 2004. Every car sold in the US since 2008 has had tyre pressure monitoring fitted to it. Unfortunately, our federal regulators don't deem it a necessary feature for vehicles coming to Australia. I'm not quite sure why, as we run exactly the same tyres as they do elsewhere in the world. The PBS trucks, high performance units, will all benefit from tyre management, from tyre monitoring. We come back again to how do we do it? Oh, this is one of the tools that we use. Very simple device. There's a pressure sensor goes on every valve stem of the truck, and we can actually monitor the tyre pressures in real time. The driver doesn't need to leave his seat. He can be going down the highway at 100 kilometres an hour and think, why is the truck pulling to the left? Let me check the tyre pressures. It must be a crosswind. Or no, I've got a tyre going down. So being able to measure, monitor, maintain, manage, make money. This is from our test bench where we've simulated a road train. So you're seeing vehicle A on the left-hand side. We're going through, scrolling through the twin steer tyres there. We're onto the first trailer, a triaxle there. We're onto the third trailer. Now, this is a 72 or 75 wheel road train that we're looking at. We're going to complete this tyre pressure check in just under a minute. For a man doing this on the ground, it would take him, if he was doing 2 minutes a tyre, 75 tyres, 150 minutes, 2 to 3 hours to do. We've done it in just under a minute. So if you're paying $150 an hour for a tyre service to check tyres, relying upon the man to read the numbers properly, for the gauges to be calibrated, to record the data, that's going to be costing you $450 a time. If you're doing that on a fortnightly basis, which is the absolute bare basic minimum required, then you're going to be spending, what, $6,000 a year just to have the pressures checked. What happens to the tyres when they're out on the road? How do you check them? So the age-old question, why change? Oh, we're too busy, it costs too much. I've heard lots. And it's one thing we've seen from the COVID, doing the same thing and expecting a different result is the definition of, you got it, insanity. So why don't we look at change? Why don't we embrace change? Why are we still treating tyres as we did 50 years ago? And the age-old question, why continue to assume your tyres are okay? Why? We've got the technology that we don't need to assume. We can actually determine and we can predict. We can understand what our tyres are doing. So that's enough for me at the moment. Again, this image coming up, that car transporter absolutely trashed out in the middle of the air highway, and it can't happen to me. Well, it does happen. And in the images coming up here, you'll see where a road train parked on the right hand side in the bush and took the front off a car, 2 people killed. The operator of that transport company is in a world of pain at the moment. So questions along the way, if you want to text them in, email them in, if you've got, want to unmute, I'm here, let's go.
Yeah, please, if you would like to ask Adam a question, if you can unmute your audio and elaborate. Anything coming in, Adam? Any questions that you find you regularly get after delivering this presentation?
Yes, there's the age-old, well, what can we do? Start to consider the tyres from a holistic viewpoint. They're a critical part of the vehicle system. They're not just a tyre, they're not just another consumable. For most transport operations, tyres are the second highest operating cost. So there's a lot of low-hanging fruit. You can save 10% on your tyre costs, 2%, 3% on your fuel burn, extend your wheel end life out 10%. All of those are very positive economic numbers. But the biggest positivity is coming from the safety, from the fact the drivers are less fatigued because they're not fighting the rig down the road, from the reduction of potential events of having a steer tyre fail. So there's lots of positives to looking at tyres from a holistic viewpoint. I'd urge you all to have a look at the tyres, have a look at how you can actually improve the safety, how you can reduce the costs. We have the tools today, we can do it. If you need, ask.
Hey Adam, it's Tim from Gold, so I've got a question for you.
Thanks, Tim. Go ahead.
Just interested to know if you've had any experience with lug locks as opposed to the wheel nut indicators.
There's a variety of different systems around. All of them will provide an indication that a wheel nut has worked loose. What it won't do is indicate that the wheel stud has been overstretched, over-torqued. So the wheel stud has become plastic, and regardless of how tight it's tightened, it won't provide the clamping force that's required. There's a lot in wheel nuts, captured wheel nuts, the tensioning, the clamping, down to cleaning of the wheels before they go back onto the hub so that there's no grip, there's no sand. The indicators are a very useful tool, but they're only just an indicator. They're not a tool that's actually going to save you, in my opinion. I'm not discounting them as a tool. They can hide the underlying symptoms.
Thanks for that.
Okay, any further questions for Adam this morning?
Hey Adam, Larry Phillips. I was just wondering, with the heavy vehicle regulator looking at proper maintenance of vehicles, how important are they looking at tyres in that regard, or are they sort of just still disregarding them?
Thanks for your question, Larry. It's quite a contentious point. The underlying factors is that tyres on heavy vehicles, vehicles over 4.5 tonnes, are not actually required to be inflated. New Zealand legislated in 2001 that all road-going tyres shall be appropriately inflated according to load and speed. Under Australian design rules, we have that for vehicles under 4.5 tonnes. There's no such requirement for vehicles over 4.5 tonnes. The NHVR put out a procedure for roller brake testing. So this is the brake testing of heavy vehicles on stationary rollers. They had a multi-page discussion about the pneumatic system on the trucks. Their statement about tyres was the tyre must be inflated. Well, the tyre can be inflated at 20 psi where its working pressure is 120 psi. So there's an ongoing discussion surrounding tyres and the way they're treated. There's been a research paper done into PBS tyres, and that's really more about the specific types of tyres that are allocated to on vehicle approvals. But in my opinion, they miss the underlying premise, and that is a tyre has to be inflated appropriately to actually perform the duties being asked of it. So this is an area that I continue to beat the drum and make as much noise as I can, because without tyres being appropriately inflated, the vehicle is inherently unsafe.
Thanks, Adam. Any further questions for Adam this morning?
Before we disappear, guys, I always appreciate feedback. If you think there's something that I've missed, if there's something you want to know, if you disagree, hey, if I don't know it's wrong, I can't fix it. So please appreciate all of the feedback you want to throw at me, positive, negative, I don't care. It's all good. It helps me grow. It helps me provide better content in the future. Thanks for your attendance today.
Thanks for joining us. Transafe WA is planning to continue this series of short webinars. So it is our intention to run one each month. Looks like we've just got a question. Oh, there we go. Thanks, Jan. It's just telling us that that was very interesting. So that's worthwhile. We appreciate your patience. It's our first webinar this morning. So I think we've managed, hopefully, to get a good session across to you all. Please follow Transafe WA on Facebook or on LinkedIn. That's a really good way to keep in touch with any events and projects that we're running, or you can contact me on the details there, or send us an email.
We have a forum coming up in September in Perth. So those of you who are on the West Coast, please come and attend. There'll be lots more to learn.
Yeah, that's right. Good reminder, Adam. Thank you. Yes, so Wednesday, the 23rd of September here in Perth, we'll be running a forum in Wembley. And if you would like more information about that, send us an email, or again, follow our Facebook or LinkedIn pages, and you'll see all the information popping up there. So unless there's any other questions, we'll sign off for this morning, and thank you all again for your interest and participation. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.